We're rethinking the question of being. That's what we're doing. By explicating Dasein's pre-ontological, its ontic ontological understanding of the world. No content. And we find that Dasein, being there, means that you exist. And when you exist, you are. And you have to be. To be. Zu sein. It's inevitable. As long as you are, you have to be. Some people might say, well, I can commit suicide. Maybe that's the ultimate way of being, to be. It's just, well, a very extreme way of realizing that you are, and when you are as Dasein, you also have to be your Dasein. And your Dasein is always jemeinig, mineness. It's always yours. And there, in this configuration, we move between authenticity, Eigentlichkeit, and Uneigentlichkeit. This is existential analytics. The gray area is existential analysis. This is where, for instance, Jemeinigkeit is just an existential. Everything I do concerns the way that I understand myself in the world. I can be, but this is existential analysis, I can be very egoistic, or I can be very altruistic. It's a very different way of being jemeinig, being concerned with yourself, sacrificing yourself, or demanding everything for yourself. These are existential, ontic ways of filling in. And this is not what we're doing. This is not what Heidegger is all about. This is existential analysis. Maslow's pyramid about authenticity, for instance, that the authentic self can be reached when this level is taken, is appropriately followed, this level is done with that level, and then you find authenticity. That's all existential thing. For Heidegger, it's completely irrelevant. What they do at the School of Life, giving classes on authenticity, for Heidegger, that is, just keep on doing it, I don't care, that's not philosophy, that is existential analysis. That's not what he's worried with.
Welcome back to First Philosophy. As always, this is Sonia Schwitz.
My name is Kas Molenaar.
And today we have a third mic, actually. Our wonderful producer and who chooses to go by the moniker of Petit Gilles is also mic'd up, so we're going to be hearing from him. Something to look forward to.
Definitely something to look forward to.
Another thing to look forward to is more Heidegger, as always.
Good. Yeah. Well, after having a general introduction into Heidegger's philosophy and a quite heavy close reading of important parts in Sein und Zeit, we're now delving deeper into Sein und Zeit, actually, by being in time, by exploring very important concepts, but I would still argue in quite an accessible way.
And it is Awee's and now also our responsibility and goal to make them less and less intimidating. And as a preparation, as a warming up to that, once again, we have to give a strong language warning, aka a lot of German. So don't listen to this if you're pregnant. But yeah, lots of German, but thankfully we have Kas here.
No, well, the thing is, and it might be interesting to mention that behind the scenes, we have been doing a little reading group in which we've now almost reached the first 100 pages of Being in Time.
Yeah, 10 pages a week, baby.
10 pages a week, slow and steady. I would argue that during reading the book, we occasionally come to the point where like everyone's, because I think we have a Dutch translation, there are 2 English translations floating around, and I'm reading the German as well.
Yeah.
And there is occasionally that everyone huddles over, okay, so what's the German word?
That's true.
And you do realize at some very important points that it is not just trying to be pedantic about language, because the very specific German words that he uses are instrumental value to understanding the work.
No, I agree. And also, just on a personal note, I would really love to share with the listener my impression of how Kas presides over the readings, because it happens at Kas's apartment most of the time, and you arrive and there's this table and we sit around the table and Kas in front of him has 4 books, a German the German original, English translation, Dutch translation, and then to the side German dictionary.
Yeah.
And if there are any related literature, those books are also on the table. And then Kas also has like a book stand where where he props up the book. So it's really something to behold.
I feel very. I mean, this is for the next episode maybe, but I feel very seen. Like, but this is a tie-in to a future episode. Sometimes, and we've talked about this in a past episode as well. Sometimes philosophers really focus on original language, and sometimes it can also feel a little bit over the top, or that just doing it to show off that they know how to use certain phrases. Not that often it has very good use. In Heidegger, it definitely has a lot of good use, and it's very important to do so. And Awee will also do this during the lecture. Awee will focus on German words, focus on high-level concepts. As we said, I think also in the past episode, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Don't never forget that this is also for first-year philosophy students the first time they're being introduced with all these concepts. So I would argue, or I would say to you, please just let it come over you. Let it take you away. Let it surprise you. Don't feel frightened by the technical language or by the German.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot, and that is fine.
Don't be intimidated.
Yeah.
Don't be intimidated. Yeah, that's the perfect way.
To help with being a bit less intimidated, I think Cassio and I wanted to re-emphasize 2 concepts that are very central to what Awee is going to be saying. So it's maybe nice to have a little refresher about existential versus existentiel.
Yeah, spelling with the A and the spelling with the E. What Heidegger is doing is existential analytics. So he's describing the framework, the structure. He's describing how it works, what happens. What's happening in it, that would be existential analysis. So how to give another example, like how your emotions function, that would be the structure, and what they actually are, and that you are angry because of this, that would be existential. This is not definitely not Heideggerian example, but more generally speaking. This is Awee will definitely focus a lot on this difference, and it might be if you're not attuned to it, it could be a bit confusing at times. But it's really, when he's talking about existential, then it's about the structure. That is what Heidegger is doing.
Yeah.
When it's about existential, then that would be filling in the framework. So sticking with describing the structures and not filling in the blanks, I think it is good to move to the actual lecture. And let's hear what Awee has to say on it.
Now, let's look at the analytics of existentiality as a hermeneutics of average everydayness. So this is what Heidegger is doing. He's just trying to show how we are in average everydayness. So nothing abstract, no methodological doubt, no critique, no visioning of the ideas. Just look at the world. Just describe, this is phenomenology. Just describe what shows itself as it shows itself. Now, the way that we, as Dasein, show ourselves in the world is as being in the world. Being in the world. Mark the syllabic formulation. Being in the world with stripes. It's not like being in the world. No, it's a unified whole. Being in the world. This is Heidegger's way to tackle the old philosophical problem of the subject-object division. In Western philosophy, we have this abstraction or this invention or this construction that there is something like the subjective sphere, and there's something like the objective sphere outside. This is what all analytic philosophy is about, the mind-body problem. This all stems from Descartes, of course. It's something we invented. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. Mind-body. There is no mind-body problem. We have to realize that we are always, being in the world means being orientated, being focused, caring, being occupied with something, but also being indifferent or being negligent. We are always in the world, caring, focused, orienting ourselves in the world. This is the worldliness of world, that we are not a subject in front of the world. We exist, we are already constantly, always out there. Then there is the priority, Heidegger says, of the ready at hand over the present at hand. So about the Zuhandenheit, the tools. This is Heidegger's famous tool analysis, which really got him a lot of followers and a lot of enemies. Primarily, the world does not subsist in objects. It doesn't. Primarily, the world consists of tools, and with tools you don't have to be too much of a pragmatist, but the example, Heidegger gives the example of a hammer, so it feels like as if he's talking about hand laborers, but it's not that. It's, if you look at this door around the corner, this door, you might say it's a wooden board hinged into a hole in a concrete wall. That is describing a door as an object. That's not a door. A door is to open. A door is to close. A door is to lock when you are afraid. A door is to open, to invite your friends and loved ones. That is how objects always appear in our lives. The pen you are writing with now is not an object, it is to write with. This is what it is. It's all about its function, its contacts, its purpose. That's what the pen is all about. Actually, you only realize that the pen is an object when it fails to write. Or when it's lacking. You want to write something now, you can't find a pen. Then the pen is an object. But in our everyday lives, we are surrounded with things. This is not a bottle, this is something to drink from. This coat is not a coat, it's something to wear when to not be cold. So everything is zu. It has a reason, it has a purpose. And only when things break down, the tools break down, we realize that they are objects. And now this is this is a very remarkable conclusion that you may draw, that objectivity, so objects, only exist in a deficient mode of being in the world. Maybe science as such is a deficient mode of being in the world, where we freeze things to be objects and then we start to investigate them. And there's also being with, Mitsein, very remarkable. There's a very old problem, the problem of intersubjectivity in Western philosophy. Husserl tackled it in his way. The Erfüllung, the fulfillment of the transcendental subject, can also reach the fulfillment or in the Einfühlung, the empathy towards the other. I constitute the other in all his or her real and possible manifestations. For Husserl, that was a fine solution to a very old problem, the problem that in analytic philosophy is called the problem of other minds. Since Descartes, there is a strange problem, and there are some very rich widows in Wassenaar who still believe that. The only thing I'm sure of is that I think. I can't be sure that anyone else thinks. The only thing that you're absolutely sure of is that you think. But that doesn't mean that other people think. That's not kind about this widow in Wassenaar, but I once met her. This is not. It's a made-up problem, the solus ipse problem, that you only know that you think. Heidegger says, Dasein is Mitsein, as such. Dasein is Mitsein. There is not first a Dasein, which then communicates with other Daseins, and then there might be Mitsein. No, you are Mitsein. Even in loneliness, and perhaps most urgently in loneliness, you realize that your Dasein is Mitsein. We may be all alone, still we're Mitsein, and maybe primarily when we're all alone. And then Heidegger has a very small passage on being with others, being towards others, the Fürsorge, care for others. And he has a distinction between authentic and inauthentic care for others. which has caused a lot of debate. It's only five lines in Being and Time. He says, inauthentic being with others is taking away their being, stepping in for them, helping them, doing everything for them. That is inauthentic. Authentic being with others is letting others be. Now, Heidegger's critics, and Heidegger was also later, I'll come back to that, for a brief time, a Nazi, that was involved in the Nazi National Socialist movement. So people say, well, that's typically Heidegger, typically a Nazi. So authentic being with others is letting others be. And I still, although I'm doing a bit of existential analysis here, I still want to give you some examples that I hope may convince you that Heidegger is really, really doing something very, very important here. Because what does that mean, letting someone be? If a parent has children, he has very clear, or she has very clear ideas what is best for the child. And the ultimate aim, goal of parenting is that you let your children be, that you let them find their own way in life. If you're in love with someone, the ultimate way of really being in love with someone is also letting the other be and not wanting them to be what you want them to be. Letting be is very difficult. If you're at the bedside of someone who's dying, there you find how difficult it is to let be. People will be tempted to say, when someone's at someone's bedside when they're dying, well, you will not have to endure the next financial crisis. So, that's a good thing. And you'll be glad that your wife will have the house mortgage-free when you die. Or, I got this strange ache in my back that is really hurting me. Well, you will never have problems like that anymore. So that is not letting be. Just sit there by someone who's dying. Letting be is most, this is existential analysis. I shouldn't do this according to Heidegger. I'm just trying to show you how deep philosophically this is. Letting be is the hardest thing there is.
So, letting go. Letting go is one of the most difficult things to do, but it not being what Heidegger wants to do. It's not the filling in the structures. It is just about describing the structures as they are, and not filling in the blanks. And that is where we ended off during our introduction. And it's nice to hear such a good example of what Heidegger actually does, and what Heidegger wants to do. But also, and Awee points out that this is not what Heidegger wants to do with philosophy, but that he sees worth in filling in these blanks in a way, because it shows writing down these structures and really trying to do good ontology also allows for later on, when you have those structures and you know these structures, to then reflect on existential analysis, to how it is filled in. And so you can draw conclusions from the structures that you write. And that is why I really, really like and really appreciate Heidegger's philosophy. And I would say that I do have a tendency to apply it still. That I do really try to. That I do when I talk about this with people. When someone would ask me, "What do you enjoy, particularly about Heidegger's philosophy?" This example, how difficult it is to let go and to let someone be.
Yeah.
That is not existential analytics. That is existential analysis. It is about filling in the blanks. It is not talking about the structure, almost detached. But that is what I find beautiful in this philosophy.
And of course, because I figured we might as well address it, since you already started going about letting go. Because Awee does mention that, the critics of Heidegger kind of use that, letting go is the ultimate way. Awee mentions, within the criticism, of course, like a Nazi would say that, because of course, and Awee, we should say here, I think, was it for the first time directly mentions.
Has been alluded to nationalism.
To
the primacy of German language. But is this the first time that he mentions that Heidegger was a Nazi?
Very directly. And that is exactly kind of this thing with letting go and this criticism. I do think, and I think this is also what Awee is getting on, and I think that is why he's also only now mentioning, Heidegger's involvement with the National Socialism for the first time. I think it is futile for us here in this format to try and reach the final decision about whether Heidegger should be involved on the account of that. But of course, there is such a thing that, once you know it, you can't resist. It colors, it simply just colors the way, like everything you read from him.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to try to distance yourself from it, which is exactly what you're maybe hearing in these, critiques that Awee mentioned specifically, as in critiquing the let it go on the basis of course, the Nazi would say that. But I do think that it is quite important for us to try to engage with it still in good faith, because in a way, if you cut yourself off from engaging with something because, of course, it is something a Nazi would say, you also don't really gain any insights into, okay, but why is it bad then? You don't actually examine it. And by extension, you might also not learn something that you might be copying in your own political persuasions. It makes me think, and this is a contemporary reference, but if anyone is, wants very accessible kind of cultural criticism that is contemporary, I'm sure many people have heard of Naomi Klein. She's great, writes very accessible stuff, and I think which is very important. In her latest book, Doppelganger, she engages very, very earnestly with like conspiracy theorists and like anti-vax, also conspiracists, instead of immediately dismissing them as crooks and like right-wingers and like insane people. She was like, no, but let's try to engage with it. And throughout the book, you see how she's like, okay, well, they're doing this thing. And she's like, I see kind of my allies, who are maybe more on the liberal side, kind of copying the structures and doing the exact thing that's, falling into conspiracism, but just from another side. And I think that is a great example of why we should actively try to engage with the viewpoints that we are initially immediately inclined to dismiss because of the identity of the people who espouse them.
I agree. Yeah. Wonderfully said.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, but I genuinely mean that. And what I think, I teach high school kids. I teach them philosophy. Heidegger being one of my favorite philosophers, I tend to occasionally mention him. And I do, like, after the third or fourth time that I mention him, I also start mentioning, because if these kids, like, I know that they occasionally Google the people that I talk about, which is good. I'm happy to make an impact. But when I mentioned that Heidegger was affiliated with the Nazi Party, like, of course, that is, you get a few raise eyebrows, and rightfully so. I think it's good to not immediately let that slip. I think that's a good attitude. But I also, when I do this in a lesson where I talk about my first experience with Heidegger, which was in high school as well, and for me it was such interesting and beautiful and enticing philosophy that I also saw as a way of really expressing that you can, like, alter things in your life and choose your own trajectory, and that the confrontation with death is not necessarily something, and I think this will come up later in this episode, but that is not something that should just be dreaded, and also something that can really shape your life. And then years later, I only learned of his politics. I couldn't merge the two. I couldn't merge the beauty that I saw in it in the first time. I couldn't merge it with the despicable politics. I couldn't. And we shouldn't, like, as you said, we shouldn't definitely not try to have the final say on that in this format and at this time. At the end of this lecture, Awee will mention that he's going to talk about it in the next lecture. He talks about it in a later lecture, so that is in a future episode, not next episode. He will talk about it. Maybe we'll come back to it then. We'll see. But I have been reading on this for a long while because I'm interested in this, and I'm interested in this tension. But the way you phrased it, I think that's for now the best way to approach it. Like, sure, if you see or hear things in Heidegger and you know that he is affiliated with the Nazi Party and you think, oh, but that could lead to this, I think that's good.
Yeah.
I think that's good to be aware of it. And it's also definitely worthwhile trying to see how it couldn't be.
Yeah, I agree.
And also that would be truly doing philosophy.
No, absolutely. And I mean, with, of course, we talked about the letting go, but I also want to return to another thing that Awee says. Awee really emphasizes just how influential the tool analysis in Heidegger was. And you and I, when we were discussing this, beforehand, thought that maybe it would be nice to go over in a bit more detail, explicate more the difference that Heidegger introduces in Sein und Zeit. Maybe it isn't introduced in Sein und Zeit, actually. I don't know.
I believe it is.
But the difference between ready at hand and present at hand.
So the difference between the two is, if you would just say it in like more everyday language, it would be, you don't have like a rational, conscious process before you use an object.
Right.
So if someone calls you and says, "Oh, hey, could you meet me then and then, there and there? This is the address." Like, either you switch to your notes app on your phone, or you like quickly grab a pen and a piece of paper and you write it down. Mm-hmm. You don't like either you have to look for a pen, and then the pen is absent.
Yeah.
And then you become very aware of the pen as an object that you need. Or if you're in your desk and you write with pen and paper, you just grab your pen and there's no need to think about this and you write it down. Mm-hmm. Only either when the pen is absent, when it's lacking, or when you find the pen and you start to write and no ink comes out, mm-hmm. only at that point the pen becomes an object.
Yeah.
And that is when the pen is just there, and you grab it and you use it and you write something down, there's no rational process. That is ready at hand. Mm-hmm. But when you look for the pen or when the ink has run dry, then it becomes present at hand. However, that is not something like a complete binary shift.
Yeah, it's not a one-to-one.
No, because also when it becomes present at hand, the fact that you need to fix it or you need to do something about it is also something that could then become ready at hand. So then, like, if your ink cartridge runs out from your pen, mm-hmm. you just without thinking, like, screw loose the pen, remove the ink cartridge, put in a new one, screw back the pen, and start writing again. So that is the objects appear as a way of interacting or accessing with the world, interacting with or accessing the world, and when something breaks down, it also appears as something to be fixed. So that it appears as an object, but it is also something that is very temporarily happening.
So basically, most objects, quote unquote objects, most things we readily engage with as ready at hand. Then let's say they're broken or not functioning correctly or are absent, that makes us temporarily understand their objective or like perceive them kind of in their objective presence, which would make them present at hand. Yeah. But then immediately, because you start thinking of how to fix that, or not think that, but like act on fixing that, it retrieves and kind of becomes ready at hand again.
If I've understood our last week's reading of Sein und Zeit well enough, I agree. Yeah.
Perfect. Done the homework.
One last addition to that is what everything in this context, what we just called objects or things, that is what Heidegger would call Zeug, tools.
Tools.
The pen is a tool to write, but also a door is like a tool that you open. Like every object thing that you interact with in this sense would be a tool.
Yeah, hence the tool analysis.
So
we interrupted Awee quite early on, I would say, for the second time in this episode, but that is because right after this, what we're about to hear is quite a long kind of stretch or time when Awee is mostly talking about another big thing in Heidegger, moods. And I think it's good to let him talk about it uninterrupted. And then, as always, we will annoyingly or helpfully pop in by the end of it to provide some more context, possibly. Or
this is also a point where there will be a lot of terminology. Once again, as we said in the introduction, just take it as it is. Awee is being very clear, I think, in what's coming up. I would say just sit back and enjoy.
Then there is being in as such, Erschlossenheit, disclosure. You might also say unconcealment, but as such, which means this. It's three phenomena together. First, we are always in a certain mood, according to Heidegger. He's just describing, as a phenomenologist, what is happening in the average world. In the average world, we are not animal rationale. We are not thinking animals. No. Primarily from early morning to late at night, and maybe even in your sleep, you are in certain moods. The world appears to you from a certain mood, and the world will show itself in different ways in these different moods. When you're cheerful, the world will be different from when you're bored. Wittgenstein said it, the world of a happy man is different from the world of an unhappy man. This is attunement, Stimmung, moods. And we are always in a certain mood. And we always go from one mood to another. So we're never a rational subject. No, we're always, although very vaguely, in a certain mood, and we go from one mood to the other. But this is existential, this is ontic. But what is the ontological significance of this? All these moods show me this, the existential structure of thrownness, geworpenheid, of facticity, of the contingency of my life. This is what all these moods tell me, that I am there, I'm thrown into this world. It's a bit, the word is of course a bit filled with associations maybe on Christianity, but it's very difficult to find words which have no ring at all. Heidegger tries to be as neutral, he tries to express this as empty as possible. There's just this, our thrownness. We realize our thrownness in these different moods when we begin to philosophize. But in every mood, you also understand the world in a different way. When you're bored, the whole world is a massive gray, empty place. When you're cheerful, the world is full of opportunities and wonderful things that may happen. So you understand the world in a certain way. And Heidegger uses the word verstehen. Understand is the German word, verstehen, but also projection, Entwurf. So there's Geworfenheit, which is the thrownness, and from this thrownness we have a certain understanding, an interpretation of the world, a verstehen, which is not that we understand the world. I would say that the English word understand, like the German verstehen, are very nice words. They are very humble words, very humble words. Verstehen, it means here I stand. I have some understanding. I even love Heidegger hated Perfide Albion. He hated Britain, England. But understanding, so I'm understanding something. We all lost that association. Understanding for us is getting a grip on everything. No, understanding. This is what we always have. We have some notion of what the world is all about. This is just the structures. So this means that ontologically we are a thrown project. Deep down we're a thrown project. And now to show you how philosophically important this is, so in an existential way, deeply, fundamentally, ontologically, we are a thrown project. What philosophy has done is forgetting this thrown project and prematurely addressing our thrownness as something and our projectiveness as something. The word animal rationale means that your thrownness is understood as animalitas. Can be done, but it's not philosophically very strong, because our thrownness is just, you can interpret it as animalitas, but it might be interpreted in other ways. And our entwurf, our projectiveness, we say animal rationale, but others say animal educandum. Someone else says animal religiosum. So all the philosophical anthropology remains in oblivion of the true being of our Dasein by prematurely trying to define us as animal rationale. We should just stick to this idea, stick to this idea. You have to stick to this idea for the rest of your life, your thrownness and your projectiveness. And even when we say, well, we don't use the word animalitas because we don't want to compare ourselves to animals, so we say homo. Okay, so homo sapiens. So then our thrownness is considered to be homo, which comes from humus, earth. It's an ontic, scientific way of looking at us. It's not philosophically speaking very strong. Homo, and then we say sapiens or sapiens sapiens. But someone else says, no, homo ludens. No, someone who likes Marx says, no, we're homo faber. So these are all these definitions of philosophical anthropology, and I do respect philosophical anthropology in a way, but it's just oblivious of what is really, really going on, that we are a throne project. But the third dimension, so we're a throne project, which is, and then Heidegger starts talking about speech, discourse, language. A throne project which is lost in the they. This is very controversial. Listen to what he says. Usually, in everyday existence, we, you and I, do not experience ourselves as throne projects, but we live like others do. Not particular others, but we live like undefined others. Heidegger calls this the they, das Man in German. First translation of Being in Time, it was the one, which is a bit difficult, but it's nice that the translator tried this, because the English has this, one does not do this. One cares for one's children. So the one is very anonymous. It's not someone. It's a way to avoid the idea of the existence of this throne project. But the modern translation has it that we live under the dictatorship. There is no one dictator. There's no guilty one here. Huh? Of an anonymous they. We have a tendency, and Marcuse, a student of Heidegger, wrote a wonderful book, should be read more. One-dimensional man. One-dimensional man is all about that we think what others think. We think like others. We live like others. We compare ourselves to others. We are concerned like others are concerned. We are worried what others are worried about. We are appalled about what others are appalled about. Heidegger calls this Verfallenheit, Uneigentlichkeit, so inauthenticity. This is where usually we live inauthentic lives. And fallenness, Verfallenheit, it has this kind of allusion to a fall, to sin. But that is not what Heidegger means. It's a positive choice. We choose to live day in, day out, me too, in this everyday averages where I think the way others think, I feel the way others feel. And Heidegger has three dimensions. He mentions three dimensions of this Verfallenheit. Idle talk, curiosity, and ambiguity. The first is idle talk, Gerede, chit-chat. Heidegger wrote Being in Time in 1927. He says, usually all we are trying to do, and maybe this is what I'm also doing in this class, we love to talk. We love to talk about everything. It's wonderful to talk about everything, because when you're in silence, it's difficult to be in silence. Silence may remind you of your throne projectiveness. It's nicer to talk. And long before they existed, Heidegger wrote this down, and then you had these talk shows. There's talk shows now. Oh, every night there's a table, some people are there, they don't even have anything to say, but still you go from talk show to talk show. I was once asked to go to a talk show, Pauw and Witteman they were called, and I was asked to come there, and I wrote a book on boredom, and they wanted me there. And I said, I'll come. And there would be a man who had one leg and he swam across the channel. There was a poet whose mother died and he wrote a book about it. And there was a politician who didn't want to do politics anymore. And so I would be there too. And I said, I will come, but I will walk out halfway the program. I will get up and say, I'm bored. I'm going. I think this is very boring what's happening here. And I said, I won't do it when the guy with the one leg who swam the canal, because I feel sorry for him and I admire him. I'll be very nice, but they didn't want it. One of them wanted it, the other didn't want it. I won't say whom. They're both still alive. We're just avoiding silence. Curiosity. We all jump from front page to front page, from news to news, new news. If you look at CNN, this is really what Heidegger was talking about. You have this image of CNN, of a news report, and then there's on the bottom breaking news all the time. Breaking news, more news, more news. And in curiosity, Heidegger says, we feel like we are everywhere, but in fact we are nowhere. We're swiping, we're browsing, we feel as if we have the world under our fingers, but actually we are nowhere all the time. And then there's ambiguity. Ambiguity, the language of the day. They always to find relativity. Tastes differ. You know? Barking dogs don't bite. The real issue is that biting dogs don't bark. There's this Dutch proverb, of the concert of life, no one receives a program. People like to say that. Of the concert of life, no one So is that the reason why you're standing there in the corner with your tiny little drum? From the concert of life, no one gets it. It gets a program. And then beware, the they come in all sorts. Yeah? There's the they of the upper class, my friends. Yeah? They all have a subscription to Le Monde, the French journal. Le Monde. They all have it on their coffee table. They never read it, but one has to have it. They all go to Tate Modern because one has to go to this exposition. They all have interior designers because one has to reorientate his house every 10 years. This is what the whole problem is. Either you rebuild your house or you get a divorce. Verbouwen of hertrouwen is my diagnosis of modern marriage. So the they come in many sorts. So now we can talk about, this is the bottom line of the scheme, we can talk about the being of Dasein. What is our existence? What is our existence? And Heidegger says it's care. Care is the being of Dasein. So it's not ego, it's not thinking, it's not spirit, it's not will, it's not transcendental subjectivity. Care is our being. And what is care? Is being a thrown projection lost in the day. That's what we are. We are all thrown projections, most of the time, usually lost in the day. That is how we live. This is what our existence is all about. But there's something missing in this description. So we're thrown projections lost in the day. We haven't discovered, Heidegger says, I haven't described the entirety of our existence. And for that I need, again, Kierkegaard, he says. He doesn't mention Kierkegaard, only briefly, but I need angst, Heidegger says, angst. Because here, being a thrown projection lost in the day is not everything. There's something else happening. And Heidegger follows Kierkegaard, literally. He distinguishes angst from dread and angst from fear. It's not about fear, he says. There is this experience, and he gives a wonderful example. You go to a museum with a friend, and all of a sudden suddenly you see this friend as if he's falling apart or something. He's not there anymore. He's quiet. You don't know what it is. You don't know what it is. And you walk up to him and you say, "What was that? What was happening to you? What was that?" And he says, "Oh, it was nothing. It was nothing." And then Heidegger says, that's what it was. It was nothing. It was nothingness. Suddenly, nothingness enters our lives. Suddenly, all of a sudden, with no reason, for no reason at all, angst, nothingness can enter our lives. And what? Angst, for Heidegger, not for Kierkegaard, where angst is very much combined with the idea of the leap of faith. For Heidegger, angst, dread, is the experience of the possibility of the impossibility of all possibility, death. Possibility of the impossibility of all possibilities. This is what dread, what angst tells us. The they won't have that. The they don't like that. The they won't. They don't want. What would the they say? Everyone has to die one day. Death awaits us all. There's this famous quotation from Epicurus who says, as long as I live, death is not there. And when I'm dead, I'm not there. So why should I worry? Heidegger reminds us that the not yet of death is always there. As long as I live. Goethe said it very nicely, and it's not something to be very cheerful about, but it's a very deep truth. As soon as you are born, you're old enough to die. The not yet of death is always in your existence there. Now, mind you, this sounds like memento mori without the Christian sense about it. This means that you realize your death as a possibility of the impossibility of all possibilities. And we all have to die our own death. I can sacrifice myself for someone else. I can die for someone else. But no one can take away my death from me. The not yet of my death is always there. And mind you, this is no zealotry about death. No fanaticism concerning death. J.C. Bloem, Dutch poems, once wrote, thinking about death I cannot sleep. Unable to sleep, I think about death. And Schopenhauer, not the happiest of persons, said, life is restrained death. Ingehouden sterven. And Rilke really had a nice remark. Life is a miscarriage of death, he said. There's Todesfehlgeburt, a miscarriage of death. And there's something good about this. Consider this. First there was nothing. There was nothing. Then there's life, and then again nothing. So it could be it's a miscarriage of nothingness. That's not what Heidegger is about. The lesson of anxiety is that it teaches us our being in the world as such, without any solutions about anything that, because this is what anxiety does. Everything I'm sure of falls apart. I have nothing to cling on to anymore. No thing, nothing, nothingness comes into my life. But for Heidegger, this is not something dramatic or terrible. It's also, I quoted from Omar Khayyam, I came like water and like wind I go into this universe, and why not knowing, nor whence, like water willy nilly flowing. Maybe that also is the sobriety of angst, of dread. So dread is not like a panic attack. It may have the shape of a panic attack, but in fact there's the sobriety of dread, which just means I am a thrown project and I'm usually lost in the they. And anxiety calls upon me, makes me call upon myself. That is why I mention consciousness and guilt, and I have to be very brief, but for Heidegger, consciousness, ontologically speaking, is not, as we would normally have it in an ontic or scientific sense. What is consciousness? Our conscious is the voice of God telling me how to act. Our conscious is what our parents have told us to do. Freud, superego. Conscious, being conscious, tells me what I have to do because society taught me to do this. In Heidegger says the voice of conscious, the voice of the conscious is silent. It's silent. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't say anything. It's because it's silence. My conscious, in an ontological sense, forces me back to myself as an existing Dasein. So when he speaks about guilt, again he says guilt is not that you owe someone, that is all ontic. True guilt is that you come from nothingness, and nothingness will guide you through your life towards ultimate nothingness. So if you want to talk, and then people can talk about guilt, but in existential sense, our conscious and our guilt should be understood ontologically. And really, what we really should learn is in dread, realizing that death is the possibility of the impossibility of all possibilities, we could become being towards death. Being towards death is not being terribly afraid of death and talking about death, not at all. Being towards death is embracing your finite existence as such and as a whole. That is being towards death. And Heidegger also calls this resoluteness, Entschlossenheit, resoluteness. That is embracing your own existence as a thrown project and realizing that there's this strange tendency that you get lost in the day.
So, as promised, lots on moods.
Lots of moods.
A lot of moods, a lot of vibes. I think because to borrow from Heidegger, the German language is just so much, has so many more words. And here we're stuck talking about moods, but I think it's good to mention, reiterate something that Awee mentions, but I think quite briefly, about there being two words used for what he refers to as moods in English. One of them, Stimmung, and another, Befindlichkeit. And the difference between them, Stimmung, from what I know and from what I understand, is more literally translated as a mood, which is why it's being characterized as an ontic thinking, as an ontic thing. And Befindlichkeit, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kas, because your German is incomparably better than mine, is more like finding oneself in. Yeah. In which case, it would make it like an existential structure.
No notes. Perfect. That is also how I understand it. Yeah. Yeah. What is interesting, I think, is having the space for both in your philosophy. That acknowledging the importance of finding oneself there and the way in which moods play a role in philosophy and in your interaction with the world and the way in which you are in the world, I think is magnificent.
Yeah.
It's something that I really, really appreciate.
Yeah. And also, I was just thinking, but it's almost like, dear listener, it's to warm up your interest to what's to come, because you can already see how Awee, a Heideggerian scholar, and us, less Heidegger, well, you more than I,
but definitely less.
Yeah, definitely less than Awee as well. Even through like our best attempts at really trying to engage with it, we can't help but slip into the, the moods and the ontic and filling in the colors.
Yeah.
I think that really will tie to Sartre, of course, we will discuss. But for now, we're still talking about structures.
And this is because it can be very theoretical, and it is something that we both talk about also outside of the podcast. So something, it could be more familiar to us than because it is possibly more familiar to us, we sometimes forget what could be explained upon better, I think, because we've been familiarized with it. But Awee is going to give, in the final part of this lecture, he's going to give a very, very clear example. So you have that to look forward to. But before we move to that final example and that final stretch, one thing that we did pick out and that we did wanted to zoom in on slightly is the possibility of the impossibilities of all possibilities.
What a phrase.
I mean, this is, it's fabulous, isn't it?
I love it, but it's so difficult to catch it, understand what it means just from hearing it, I think.
Yeah.
Which is why Kas and I thought that maybe we can repeat it slower and actually encourage you, if you can, if you're driving, take your hands off the wheel, take out your phone and type it in. But I do think that it's maybe nice if you write it down, possibility of the impossibilities of all possibilities, and reread it, because I think when you lay your eye upon it, it becomes clear what it is. But I think it's very difficult to hear what it is. Yeah.
And also, the first time that I heard this and that I read this, I didn't really know what to make of it as well.
Gibberish.
Sure. But then when you realize that the possibility of all, there we go. When you realize that the possibility of the impossibility of all possibilities, that is death, you can work your way backwards.
That's true.
And that's also that. For now, that sounds abstract, sure, but the Dasein has all possibilities
And is
possibility. Yeah, there is full possibility.
Yeah.
However, being towards your death, being aware of that, like living towards that death, you know that it is impossible to enact on all of that possibility because you are limited in time.
Yeah.
This is what I've, like, when my high school teacher informed me of this was like mind-shattering.
Yeah.
This was amazing. You do have all the possibilities, but you kind of need to hurry up.
Yeah.
Like, to say it in a more colloquial sense. And the fact that this death looms over you, the presence of that possibility is the possibility of the impossibility of all possibilities.
Nicely said.
And now we can look at something. I'll give you a very simple example how this works, authentic and inauthentic, without any moral judgments. Look at temporality, past, present, future. Inauthentically, the past is what's done is done. That's the past. It's behind me. The past lies behind me. The present is what is happening now. I just look at my clock and I see this is now. That's the present. The future is that what may come. That is inauthentic. This is how they approach past, present, and future. Authentically, the past is always involved in what Heidegger calls Wiederholung, repetition, which means not repetition like a goal in a football match that is shown again. The past lies not behind me, but the past is something that I interpret throughout my life. And in the moment, the present is not looking at the clock, the present is the moment of decision in which I decide about how I interpret my past. And the future is my decision of how I approach the finitude of my own life. And mind you, I gave a lot of classes in philosophy to people, heavily punished people in prisons. Philosophy Behind Bars, the project was called. And that was a very heavy thing because these were people heavily punished. They had killed sometimes many, many people. And they were looking at their past, and most of them had this, I did Heidegger with them, and they had this attitude, tendency to say, well, the reason I committed all these crimes was because my father was so cruel to me, or because nobody loved me, or they had this interpretation, which is adequate. I'm not saying there's adequate and inadequate interpretations. It's not Heidegger. It's not science. All Heidegger says, but you could also have different interpretations of your past. It's up to you, it's your decision. This means to be, that you have to be. You are and you have to be. It's up to you. You can decide that this is your past. You might also have a different interpretation of your past. You might also rethink your past. So your past is not, I'll come back to this in the class on Gadamer, is not just only behind you, but it's also ahead of you. It's new interpretations, and I'm talking now dramatically about people who committed terrible crimes, but all of you, and also me. We have this story about our lives, we have this interpretation about our lives, and there are some people that we blame, and we have this. But these stories can change. I'm not saying they have to change, and I don't say there's a true story. There is no true story. But this is Dasein. This is authentic Dasein, that you realize that your past is not just behind you. Of course, things have happened and things that cannot be undone. But your relationship to them, your interpretation of them, that can be changed. In existential therapy, by Yalom and many others, try to use this fruitfully. Sometimes if you're stuck in one story about your past, you can feel it like an enormous burden. The past is not what lies behind me. The past is what I consider my past. and I can reconsider my past and reinterpret it. That is authenticity. So it's not about finding true love or true life or optimal life. No, it's just accepting, embracing, the rising to the occasion of your being there. That's what Heidegger is all about. Rising to the occasion of your being there. Considering your existence as a challenge, not as a condition. So, human conditions might be the title. The human condition is that you should realize that your life is a challenge. You're a thrown project, and you may embrace it to the full, or you may try to evade it. I had some words on Heidegger on National Socialism, but I'll do that on Tuesday. I'll just repeat, I'll just say again what I think is, because in Sartre thinks, on Tuesday we're going to read Sartre, which is also a great philosopher, and Sartre tries to show that there is an ethics and a moral in what Heidegger says. Heidegger tries to avoid it, and Heidegger, I think Heidegger is doing the right thing. There is no morality here in being and time. There is no right way to live. Authenticity and inauthenticity just means the difference of seizing your life as a thrown project or trying to evade it and live the life of the they. Heidegger says being in time is kategoristai. All I'm doing is describing everyday average structures of my and your existence, my being. But it's also kategoristai. I'm telling you straight in the face how you are. What is the event of your being there? I once had a very good student, Mariska Goris, who said, being in time is a very odd book. It's the only book that really begins after you've read it. It's the only book that really begins after you've read it. Rising to the occasion of your being there, with no one telling you what you should do, realizing that it's really up to you. We'll go on on this subject with Sartre. See you Tuesday. Bye.